I know you did.
You can thank your lucky stars, I'm not up here to sing. So the United States didn't get into World War I until almost 3 years had gone by. But once it did get in, Cambridge jumped right in. They had a draft that started in 1917, and it was the younger people, the 21 to 30. We had some who volunteered. We had some who were drafted. By 1918, they needed more. They expanded the range, 18 to 45, and we got a lot of our young students joining the Student Army Training Corps in college. Here at home, they had the Women's Land Army. They had the garden clubs. They had the women's suffragettes, the women's groups from the local churches get together. These were the farmerettes. They played a big part of keeping Cambridge going. They did the plowing, they did the haying, they made sure everybody here had food to eat. Keeping in mind, during that period, the women that I just spoke of did not have the right to vote. During the middle of the war, in November of 1917, the women of New York State did gain the right to vote, and that next year, in 1918, we had more women who showed up to the polls in Cambridge than we did men. Right here in the village, the Seed House girls, they made sure that packages went out every week to the soldiers. They had some sort of a caravan to make sure those things arrived there quite often much before packages from individuals did. The Cambridge Bank, which at this time was over on the corner of Washington Street, was responsible for the war bonds. Every one of the communities was given an amount of money they were asked to raise. We were asked to raise $100,000. We raised $250,000. The hospital had just been started. They broke ground up there. It was not able to open until after the war because we did not have the medical staffs around. The Boy Scouts built their war garden down on Washington Street. Right about where we're standing in 1918, they put up the big board that listed everybody who was in the war with an indication of where they were. Finally, when the armistice was signed, we had a big parade. We had lots of parades throughout the village. Some of the names of the people that I've been able to track down here, Amelia Buckley was one of the Red Cross nurses. She must have been very significant in her role because in 1919, when everyone was home and they had a parade, she was in the front line with the men. Her brother, Ted Buckley, he was at Cornell. He was one of the members who joined the SATC, the Student Army Training Corps. We had Anna Donahue. She was one of the first American Red Cross women to head across the ocean. She was the sister of Mrs. Frank Pemrick. Many of you remember over on Academy Street. We had Cliff Barker and Clarence Cook join the SATC when they were at RPI. Charles Hoxie, his dad Florence lived on Spring Street. He's the one who built the Green Bridge for us here. Dr. Hoxley was in charge of an entire hospital over in the south of France. Later went and started the medical program at the University of Kansas. We had Alfred King, who died of pneumonia. He'd only been in the service for 3 years. We had George Clark. He was our only one who was a member of the Balloon Corps. A lot of women contributed in ways other than joining the service. Wells College put together a program of shipping people over there, and Elizabeth Marshall from Cambridge went over, and much to her surprise, as she was getting off the boat, walking around Paris, someone called her, "Hey, Libet." her nickname here in Cambridge. One of her friends was there to greet her. Carl Cook was a member of the gas protection program. In 1915, when the Germans started using poisonous gas, the United States tried to come up with something to prevent it. But by the time we got in the war, both sides were using those gases to the detriment of everyone there. We had William Watkins from Ash Grove, who single-handedly went over the top and captured 17 Germans. And for Sally, I did some research on her dad, Atwood Allen, whose nephew, Fred Maston, from North Hoosick. They went over together. They were only in the service for less than a month, and they were both shipped over to France. They spent just about the entire time till in France. Atwood was located around Flanders. There was many battles there in Belgium, and that was right where all the poisonous gas started. Fred Maston was one of the local tragedies. He died 4 days before the armistice. In December, when they started sending our boys home, his uncle, Atwood Allen, said no thanks and went AWOL. He said, I'm going to see Fred's grave. Because so many of these men died overseas, the mothers, the women were not able to see their sons and husbands. So in 1929, the U.S. government put together the Gold Star pilgrimage. If you lost someone in the war, you put a gold star in your window. We had 3 women who signed up for these Gold Star pilgrimages. Mrs. Mary Durfee from St. Luke's Place, who lost her son Harold. Mrs. Lalika Smart from Academy Street, who lost Chaplain Daniel Smart. And Mrs. Bessie Maxon, who lost her husband, Earl Maxon. On Arbor Day in 1919, the graduating class honored 3 former graduates of the school. They put together 3 trees, one of which still remains over there. The first tree they put together was for Earl Maxon. You always see his name associated with the post, but boy, before that, he was Mr. Cambridge. He was a top scholar, he was a top athlete. He set all kinds of track records that lasted for a long time. In the middle of 1904, which was the very first perfect football season for Cambridge, Earl was the captain, and he walked off the field, said, I've got to go to war. He headed to the train station. The entire village went, played the band, and sent him off as he started his beginning of his military career. One of the other trees that was put up there was for Chaplain Daniel Smart, whose monument is over there. His father, James, was the editor of the Washington County Post. He had only been over in France for about 3 months after being ordained as the chaplain and lieutenant. He was wounded, he went to the hospital, and instead of getting treatment, he took care of the others. He kept their spirits up, and by the time it was his turn, he had already succumbed to the wound. The third tree, which I'm pretty sure is the one that's still there, is for George Wright. His nephew, Bob Wright, lives over on Gilmore. George was a member of the class of 1919, but back then kids didn't graduate when they were 18 because they had to spend an awful lot of time going and working on the farms. He actually came home on a furlough for Thanksgiving in 1918, had to go back to camp. He contracted influenza and died right away. The American Legion in 1919, December, created their post. Their first commander was Malcolm Parrish, Tink's dad. And in 1937, that bridge that goes across Main Street there was dedicated in a ceremony. And as the plaque over there says, may they not have died in vain. Thank you.